Final Fireball member, team member of the Pantheon, Owen Turtenwald's accomplishments, they are many, and he's playing Reanimator.
And, this matchup, I think game one probably favors Reanimator a little bit simply because they can play around the Wastelands. They also have a lot of really cheap, efficient spells, and they're not really a combo deck, so to speak, like what Rug Delver would generally like to play against.
Yeah. The tough thing here, obviously, for Stephen Mann is if Turtenwald ever gets any of those threats in play, be it a Gristlebrand, he has one Sphinx of Steel, and an Astral Rider, and Hellish Norn, that's it.
Yeah,
It's
any fatty against Rug Delver is good enough.
Yeah.
Doesn't really need to be devastating.
Now, when you're playing Blue-Eye Red Delver, which obviously is a popular deck this week, and we saw Shahar Shenhar playing that, they have Swords of Plowshares as an out to a large creature in play, but when you're playing Rug, you've got those bolts, you've got some green creatures, you do not have swords.
Yeah, this is a tough one for Rug Delver, particularly on the draw, simply because one, your mana denial strategy is a lot harder to go off when you're on the draw, and two, a lot of your counter spells, the Reanimator deck can play around. So we'll see how this goes. Steven does have turn one Delver, which is obviously something the deck desperately needs.
Turtenwald going to cast a Brainstorm after playing a Verdant Catacomb, so it will be a perfect Brainstorm as he draws Gristlebrand, Brainstorm, and Brainstorm. So not so bad as he's going to put back 2 cards here. A little surprising to see him playing Reanimator. It's the same deck that Jensen's playing this week, and I'm not sure if Reed Duke is as well. Obviously, those 3 guys work.
Super friends.
Yeah, they might as well be. The PGO, they call themselves. I wouldn't be surprised if they're playing the exact 75, but Reanimator, kind of an interesting choice this weekend. We've seen it a little bit on the Open Series. Tommy Graves winning a Legacy Open with that deck in Columbus. How do you feel about that as a choice?
Well, it's one of those decks that doesn't care about True Name Nemesis. So I think if your logic is, I just don't want to have to play those True Name Nemesis mirrors, which can be quite frustrating, I think it's a decent way to go because one, you're pretty good against creature-based decks. Like you're not bad against elves, you're not bad against Death and Taxes, and the other thing is you actually have disruption. Like you have cards like Cabal Therapy, Thoughtseize. You have access to ways to disrupt combo game one because you also have Force of Will. So I think it's actually a pretty solid choice simply because I don't think you have a bad matchup against anything game one, which is something like players like Huey and Owen really just want to make sure about.
Yeah, normally these are guys who would play Sneak and Show, but Sneak and Show is on a pretty sharp decline right now as far as success. Obviously at the back end of last year, we saw Huey crushing tournaments of the deck left and right. We don't see that now as here's a Force of Will, turning Delver into the Insectile Aberration. Turtenwald fetching on his turn when Stifle is down.
Yeah, and the good thing for Steven that he has that Force of Will now because Owen does have Careful Study Reanimate along with a Grizzlebrand to discard. So he will be able to reanimate a target next turn if he chooses to go for it. So Steven, fortunately, does have a way to stop that from happening.
And of course, the goal with Rug Delver is pressure backed by disruption in the form of Wasteland, counterspells, Force Will, Spell Pierce, all of that good stuff. Looks like Stephen Mann has really cobbled that together already this game.
Yeah, and this deck, if he didn't have that turn one Delver of Secrets, it'd be so much worse because the whole point is, being able to kind of efficiently deny your mana and use these cheap counter spells to kind of slow down your opponent so that you can keep chipping away at their life total. That's why Rug Delver really needs one of their 1-drops or Tarmogoyf on turn 2 to kind of get that strategy going.
And it's kind of funny too because, a lot of people call this deck Canadian Threshold or what have you. There's different names for obviously every Legacy deck. I like that this deck is identified as Rug Delver because when it has Delver as its first turn threat, it's a much different deck than when it has a Tarmogoyf or a Nimble Mongoose going.
Yeah, exactly. Because ultimately, this deck is really just a mana denial deck more than anything else. And in order for a mana denial deck to function, you need to be able to kill them before they can draw their way out of it, which is why Delver Secrets on turn 1 is so important.
Ponder's going to resolve. Mystery card goes to the grip for Mann. We know he has a Force of Will. He's got some other options there. I know he has a Stifle, I believe, in his hand as well, which Turtenwald did a nice job of playing around. There is a Wasteland to take care of this Underground Sea.
Yeah, so this is a great situation for Steven. Not only is he going to be able to deny Owen some mana, he's got that Force Will. He also has a Daze in his hand as well. But not sure if he has another blue card. No, he does. He has a Ponder. So he has access to effectively 2 counterspells if he needs them.
He is in what we like to call the driver's seat. As here's a Careful Study. Big question here I would ask you. When you're playing against Reanimator, do you counter the Careful Study or do you counter the reanimation spells?
I think you have to counter the reanimation spells simply because I don't think you can afford to really pitch a Force of Will, and you can't daze it here. Yep. So in this particular situation, I don't think you really have any other option. You don't want to pitch a Force of Will just to counter a Careful Study.
Well, he's moving in. It's time to reanimate targeting Gristlebrand. We'll see if Mann is ready to battle over this. You see the Daze? You mentioned the Force of Will and the other blue card. Obviously, he cannot let this resolve, so Daze is where he's going to start picking up that Tropical Island for the alternate casting cost. Turtenwald will do the same, except he's picking up an Underground Sea. But again, we know that Mann has the Force One and blue card. The question is, does Turtenwald have more ammo to fight back?
Well, the good news for Turtenwald is he does have, it looks like he has another Brainstorm in his hand. So we know that this probably isn't going to resolve because Steven does have a Force of Will. But it's not over for Owen yet because he still can come back. He basically, anytime that Grizzlebrand comes into play, pretty much game over.
Yeah, it's over.
So even if it's not this turn, as long as he can get it into play over the next 2 turns, I think that might be enough. Because Steven doesn't have any other mana, any other creatures in play other than that just that one Delver.
There's a Force of Will now after the dazes do resolve, removing Ponder, targeting the Reanimate. Turtenwald going to consult his hand. Reanimate will get countered. Of course, Mann will take 1 to do that from the Force of Will, but he's accomplished his goal. Grizzlebrand is not in play currently.
Yeah, and now he's going to be able to play a Nimble Mongoose and basically put Owen on close to a turn 2 clock there.
The one thing, too, is you take a look at Mann's hand. You mentioned the Nimble Mongoose. There's a Bolt. There's a Stifle. There's obviously the Tropical Island that he picked up from the Daze, and then you see a Misty Rainforest. Those are the 5 cards he's looking at. You've got no Ponders, Brainstorms, any deck manipulation. You don't have any counter spells either. So if Turtenwald is able to spike another reanimation spell, he'll still be over.
Yeah, and that's why that deck is just so powerful because you have a lot of redundancy in your quote-unquote combo pieces. And so even though he just lost a huge counter battle, he's still in it with a timely top deck, or if he could just survive maybe 1 more turn. But again, Steven is going to be able to hit a Nimble Mongoose here if he chooses, but it looks like he chose not to, which I'm not sure I agree with.
He might be trying to bluff here, a Spell Pierce, a Daze, something of that nature. But if you're Turtenwald, you just have to kind of jam your reanimation spells if you draw one anyway. So how much value does bluffing really have as here's a Brainstorm?
Yeah, there's no way Owen's not going for it, so I don't think bluffing really matters here. He does have a Stifle, but the problem is that if you play the Nimble Mongoose, because you have a Bolt in your hand, you're basically reducing your clock by like 2 turns.
Yeah.
You're basically putting Owen on a turn 2 turn her clock there. So I think he had to play the Nimble Mongoose there. Now he's just giving Owen too much time.
Turtenwald, among the 3 cards you do with the Brainstorm, you see a couple of Gristlebrands over there. There's also an Exhume, and he has a Thoughtseize as well. So he's going to put Gristlebrand back, knowing that he does not need that. He'll put another card back as well. See if he's going to try to sacrifice this fetch land now or later. We saw when Mann was tapped out, Turtenwald sacrificed the Flooded Strand right away. He's going to sacrifice now, and I would be a little bit surprised if this doesn't get stifled.
Yeah.
As he's really not going to get a better spot, will Mann, so he will stifle the Flooded Strand, and Turtenwald will just pass the turn
And I'm
back.
surprised Turtenwald did it on his turn because obviously he has a Thoughtseize. It looks like he has Thoughtseize, Exhume, and a land. So if he just tried to do it at the end of the next Steven's turn, he could have still Thoughtseize, Exhume in the same turn in the following turn. So why not just force Steven to do something on his turn?
Yeah.
Because actually the way it would have played out, Steven probably casts Nimble Mongoose and plays a sack land now anyway. So we'll see if that... Because now Steven did draw a Brainstorm, so he does
now
have more
he's kind of in the driver's seat as far as like if Turtenwald upkeeps the fetch land, for example, then the Tropical Island's tapped and he has the fetch land, and then you sacrifice the fetch land to cast a Brainstorm. It really puts Mann in a really tough spot. But now he's able to cast a Brainstorm and make it a perfect one. Even though the cards that he drew there, not so good. 3 lands.
The only reason to really sack there is if you want to cast Thoughtseize that turn. So you're basically playing around a second Wasteland as opposed to a 1 Stifle.
Sure.
I would have preferred to just play around a second Wasteland because that way on my turn I could have just cast Thoughtseize and Exhume in the same turn.
Okay.
Or at least force him to use a Stifle on his turn. But either way, Steven cast Brainstorm doesn't reveal any kind of counter spells. So Owen, if he chooses to go for the Exhume next turn, it should resolve.
Well, Mann's going to come across for 3 Insectile Aberration. Mann's going to take a look at his deck after sacrificing that Misty Rainforest. We'll see if it's going to be Volcanic or Tropical. He's going through his deck very quickly here, and he's going by Volcanics, it looks like. So he's going to go Tropical Digging, and he's going to cast Nimble Mongoose now instead of last turn.
Yeah, and unfortunately for him, Owen's at 9 now, so it's really not going to matter. If that Grizzlebrand enters play.
Yeah, when Grizzlebrand comes to town, things get mighty difficult for Rug. So Nimble Mongoose is going to hit the table here for Mann in a moment. There it is, and it does have Threshold, so it's a 3/3. It's as big as it can be. But we're going to watch Turtenwald probably untap and just fire off Exhume and hope for the best, as he cannot afford to cast Thoughtseize right now.
No.
And, the other thing, too, is that he can't afford to play around a card like Daze, or, obviously can't beat a Force of Will given the texture of his hand. And I wouldn't be surprised, obviously, if the former player of the year, and one of the best players in the game right now, comes to the appropriate conclusion of, I don't have a choice, I have to cast Exhume.
Yeah, because he can't. The Thoughtseize will drop him down to 7, and he's facing 6 worth of attackers. So then he just loses to a Bolt,
Yep.
which is perfectly reasonable for Steven to have, for him to assume. So I think I'm with you. I think Owen just has to cast the Exhume here. I don't think he really has any time to buy himself here.
So you see he's taking his time going through the iterations, man with 2 cards in his hand. Both these players, of course, both top-8 Pro Tour Gatecrash. And those are their lone top 8s as Turtenwald's going to play the Underground Sea and cast an Exhume. He wants his Gristlebrand back. Man's going to look at his hand. He's going to look at no answers for a second here. And then Gristlebrand's going to come back into play for Turtenwald. So just again, just a 7/7 lifelinker, not like really a big deal.
Not the worst thing in the world.
He should be okay.
He should be okay. So Steven here, again, the Rug Delver just can't do anything game 1. One Steph Addy's in play, and Grizzlebrand going to be able to, he can't even attack here because of the life link. He's got that Bolt in his hand, but he can't really push through enough damage here.
So I'm trying to think of what interesting lines of play Man can have here. Of them, I think the best one that he can make, Osip, is just leaving Delver back on defense and then having the fetch land in play and then blocking with the Delver on Gristlebrand and then bolting it so that Turtenwald doesn't gain life. I think that's the best he can do. He's just going to wasteland here and just pass the turn
Yeah,
back.
the problem with that plan is the Owen's still at 9, so you would need to have 2 bolts in your hand. He doesn't even have 1 red mana, and he would have to use one of the bolts on his Delver. So the problem is he just doesn't have enough action to come back from this. So now Grizzlebrand's going to come over, and even the Thoughtseize took out the bolts, so now Owen's just going to gain 7 life no matter what.
Up to 14 he goes. Man is going to draw his card. You're likely not going to see Turtenwald activate the Gristlebrand because he doesn't have a reason to.
He doesn't know. Yeah, against Rug Delver, you don't need to draw 7. You just keep. It's a 7/7 flying lifelink.
Yep, that's it.
That's all it is.
Man going to play a Delver, pass the turn back. Turtenwald goes down to 8. But he untaps with the 7/7 lifelinker. It can just keep happily attacking because there's really not a lot that Steven Man can do about this. In we go again.
So now Owen can only really lose to like multiple lightning bolts. But again, Steven has no cards in his hand, and he only has potentially 1 red source in play. So
Man going to look at the top of his deck for Delver Secrets to check to see if an instant or sorcery. It's not. He's going to sacrifice the Misty Rainforest, go down to 2, try to find something better to draw as there's a Volcanic Island.
yeah, so now he can attack. The Delver did not reveal an instant or sorcery, so his Delver won't flip into an Insectile Aberration. He does have a 1 Insectile Aberration already flipped to block the Grizzlebrand, so he won't die next turn. But again, Owen will gain another 7 life, so really not much Steven can do here, and he packs up.
So, Owen Turtenwald going to win game number 1 over Steven Man. Reanimator up a game over Rug Delvers. We'll take a look at the sideboards here. You have Steven Man's Rug Delver deck list in front of you. What does he have to help himself here?
Yeah, so we said game 1 was going to be kind of difficult. After board, though, he does have a lot of options. He's got a Surgical Extraction, which can come in, which can obviously take out one of Owen's reanimation targets in response to an Exhume or a Reanimate. He also has 2 copies of Grafdigger's Cage, which is also a pretty good card. It means that any creature in Owen's graveyard won't be able to come into play from that graveyard. So those 3 cards, along with 2 copies of Spell Pierce, which I could kind of see coming in because, again, Steven's plan is going to be Mana Denial, plus Owen's deck doesn't play many lands anyway. It only plays around like 16, 17 lands usually. So even though Owen has a lot of cheap spells in his deck, a timely Spell Pierce can really be important. So I definitely see those cards coming in. He's got plenty of cards he can take out. He's got 1 copy of Dismember. That's obviously not going to be that great in this matchup. I also don't love the Lightning Bolts here. Obviously, Lightning Bolt is sometimes an out for you. But in general, though, I just don't think it's enough high-impact spell. So I think you kind of probably have to board those out as well.
Yeah, I think you can definitely board in some better cards. We'll take a look at Turtenwald's sideboard here. 2 Thoughtseize, 2 Show and Tell, 2 Massacre, 2 Jace the Mind Sculptor, 2 copies of Pit the Needle, 2 City of Traders, 1 Duress, 1 Iona Shield of Myria, and 1 Blazing Archon. Now, oftentimes with this Reanimator deck, as we've seen over the past couple of years, they have a couple Show and Tell's main deck, which Turtenwald does have 2. The other 2 in the sideboard, and the City of Traders to help cast them on turn Turn 2, because he doesn't have Lotus Petals in his deck. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that package come in. He also has some Thought Seizes to kind of pave the way through these counter spells, even though Mann will have a lot of them after sideboard. If he wants to play a little bit of a longer game, which I'm not too sure he does, Jace the Mind Sculptor is an option. He also has a Singleton Duress. His reanimation targets in the matchup are all fine. Iona is okay. I don't know if it's better than Elish Norn, Ashen Rider, or Sphinx of Steel, and obviously it's not better than Gristlebrand. And then Blazing Archon is also fine, but I don't think he really needs to change up his reanimation package too much. Maybe you get the Ashen Rider out for something else.
Yeah.
But that's really about it.
I think I might bring in the Blazing Archon just because I'm probably bringing in more copies of Show and Tell. So I kind of just want a higher chance of drawing a fatty, because again, it doesn't matter which fatty it is. Yeah. Even an Iona is fine.
It's good enough.
Sometimes it's only going to be really bad if you're really far behind, which is unlikely given it's Rug Delver. Again, Force of Will. I don't love Force of Will in this matchup because, again, when you're playing Rug Delver against another Rug Delver deck, Force of Will is one of those cards that you board out.
Yep.
So I think I could see, even though Steven needs to keep in his Force of Wills, I think I could see Owen maybe boarding out those for a more proactive card like Thoughtseize, and then bringing in those City Traders as well to kind of play around cards like Daze and just keep making your mana.
Now, one thing also to keep in mind here is Turtenwald does have experience playing Rug Delver, and also won a Grand Prix of Blue, White, Red Delver. And while Blue, White, Red, and Red Delver aren't the same decks, the same principles really apply, and the same cards, both those decks really have access to, which is counter spells that kind of tax your mana, Spell Pierce, Luster Storm, that sort of thing. So you have to believe that he's very used to playing against those cards, because we know he's used to playing with them.
Yeah, the key thing for Owen is going to be trying to figure out what is the sideboard package that he has to contend with. I mean, Rug Delver, we've seen some Rug Delver decks board in some copies of Ashen Rider in order to deal with Show and Tell. And we've also seen Rug Delver decks play a traditional sideboard, like with Grafdigger's Cage, Tormod's Crypts, etc. So given that Show and Tell, Sneak and Show has been on the decline, I think it's safe for Owen to assume that Steven's probably going to be bringing in some kind of anti-graveyard hate, like Grafdigger's Cage or Surgical Extraction. So I think those Show and Tells are definitely coming in.
Yeah, for sure. I think he just wants to have a high density of ways to put cards in the big idiot into play, basically.
Yeah, it's like, okay, you're going to have more counter spells? Well, I'm going to have more ways to get guys in play. Yeah. So just try to counter everything.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, you better have a threat in play attacking me.
Now, again, Mann, both these guys have won Open Series over the course of Season 1. Turtenwald, again, did his in Standard the first week in Indianapolis with Mono Black Devotion, which I wouldn't be surprised if he was playing that or some variant, be it the black-red version that Eric Froelich played in Cincinnati or the black-white version that has been picking up some steam over the past couple of months. And Stephen Mann, he won Atlanta actually on my birthday when I messed up my foot. I didn't get to call it, unfortunately, with Rug Delver. So, again, these two players very accomplished, both top 8 in the same Pro Tour, both playing against each other here in round 3.
And I that's one of the things I really love about Legacy is that you have archetype experts.
Yeah.
So I love the fact that these people, no matter what the results of last week's tournament were or what they think the metagame is, they're going to play the same deck no matter what. They might tweak their sideboard, but they're going to play Rug Delver. They're going to play Ant. They're going to play Elves. Like, you have those those deck experts, which I really like.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see any crazy stuff like we saw in Los Angeles last weekend, like the blue-green food chain deck, for example, that Jonathan Job made top 4 with. I think people are going to dial
the splash.
They're going to dial it down a little bit for the Invitational. Maybe play something a little bit safer.
Yeah, because again, you don't need to gamble as much for an Invitational because, if you get that second loss, you're still live for top 8. Whereas in the Open, you kind of sometimes need to get a little luckier to make that top 8.
Skull and Tarn's going to start it off here for Mann. He'll go down to 19. We'll see if he's going to search for a Trop or Volcanic, and it will be a tropical island. And we'll see if he's going to do some manipulating or get the game off with a Delver, which, again, since he's on the play, I think is ideal.
When I'm playing against Rug Delver and their first play is Ponder, I am ecstatic. It's like a sigh of relief when it's not a creature.
If you're happy about a Ponder, that means their deck is good. Here's a Nimble Mongoose to start things off.
So Nimble Mongoose, not as good as Delver, obviously, but at least it's something. Again, Steven's deck is all about just chipping away at your life total and denying your mana.
Turtenwald's, he's looking at a Brainstorm, looking at a Careful Study, I think looking at a couple black cards over there as well. Obviously, he's in the tank with a decision to make. We'll see what he comes out with here momentarily.
Yeah, and Owen's not playing the hyper-aggressive version of Reanimator with Lotus Petals.
Yeah.
So he doesn't have the potential for a turn 1 reanimation spell. So it looks like he's just deciding if he wants to lead with either a brainstorm or a careful study. And this is risky because if he has the days and a wasteland, then you basically really expose yourself, because I don't believe Owen has another blue source in his hand.
Yeah, the other thing too is, yeah, if he does have a daze and a wasteland here, not only that, but you're really working your way towards the Mongoose very, very quickly here. And I always do wonder, as you come across for one here with the no Mongoose, Turtenwald's going to go down to 19, if it is appropriate to counter a card like Careful Study, or if you wait for the reanimation spells. But in that situation, Mann felt that it was correct to daze the Careful Study.
Yeah, and I also think it's great because if Steven does draw a wasteland, you're in a great situation, because a lot of times those careful studies can kind of set up your draws for the next few turns.
Here's a Thoughtseize from Turtenwald. I'm going to lay out that hand. You see a Stifle, there's a Ponder, there's a Misty Rainforest, there's another Nimble Mongoose over there, and there's one more card off screen. We'll see if they can move it over so you guys can see it at home. But either way, Turtenwald's going to take 2. He's going to go down to 17 and select a card here momentarily.
I'd be surprised if it wasn't Ponder or the mystery card that we can't see. So it looks like a Daze. I'd still think the Ponder, because I think you can at least play around Daze now. He did draw Polluted Delta for the turn as well. So Steven's hand's pretty bad. If he can't find more action, I think Owen's in a pretty reasonable shape right now, considering he has a Brainstorm and an Entomb and an Exhume. So I think I might want to just take the Ponder and make sure that Steven doesn't see more than one card a turn.
You know, one dangerous thing, give a player like Turtenwald this much information, he knows what to play around moving forward. That's terrifying. And you said Ponder, and that's exactly what he's going to take, because, all right, I know you've got a Stifle, I know you've got a Daze, you have access to red mana off of the Misty. I can play around those things.
Yeah, well, that's the thing about Rug Delver, is that they do seem to have a lot of counter spells, but they're really conditional counter spells.
Yeah.
They're not hard counter spells. So you can play around the Daze. And now that Owen knows about that and Stifle, he can play the rest of the game accordingly.
And for 1, it comes the Nimble Mongoose. Turtenwald goes down to 16. Mann going to play the Misty Rainforest that Turtenwald knew about, along with the Nimble Mongoose that Turtenwald knew about before passing the turn back. Again, Mann has a Daze. He's got a Stifle. He has a mystery card that Turtenwald does not know about, as he's going to untap, take a draw, and this is a Brainstorm.
So we're going to see a main phase Brainstorm. Steven doesn't really have a way to stop it, so it's going to get cast.
Ponder.
Wow.
Ponder,
Owen,
Reanimate, Entomb.
stacked hand here. He's got multiple Entombs, multiple Exhumes, and a Reanimate. And I believe he still has that Polluted Delta in his hand as well. So wouldn't be surprised to see the Ashen Rider go away. Yep.
Yeah, he can start just jamming these things into counter spells now.
Yeah. Unfortunately, he can't cast that Ponder because he knows about the Stifle, so he can't sacrifice the sack land just yet. But either way, he could basically set it up so he just untaps next turn, cast an Entomb with mana up, and then after that, there's really nothing Steven can do.
Now, the big thing here, you know, we talked about Grafdigger's Cage in Mann's sideboard. Now would be a good time for one of those.
Oh, yeah.
I think
basically Steven needs to draw. Owen just has too many redundant copies of reanimation spells, so he needs a Grafdigger's Cage right away. I'm not even sure. A Surgical Extraction would be pretty good too, but Owen has 2 copies of Entomb, so if he loses one of his fatties, like a Grizzlebrand, he'll be able to find something else. So yeah, Grafdigger's Cage really is the card Steven needs right here.
Turtenwald going to kick it back. Mann going to take a draw step. What do we find? It's a Delver's Secrets. That's a really good Magic card, but it's not great in this situation.
Yeah, so Steven, if he plays the Scalding Tarn and the Delver's Secrets, then Owen will know exactly the remaining 2 cards in his hand. So Owen will be able to navigate the next 2 turn perfectly. He has the Ponder in his hand. I wouldn't be surprised if he just casts Ponder next turn instead of Entomb, because he just wants to get another land.
Yeah, I guess the big question is, how patient does Turtenwald want to be? Because, you know, he doesn't really have to move in right now. Doesn't have to put the pedal to the metal, but at the same time, those Mongooses are starting to get a little threatening. Now here's a Delver's Secrets. That could flip into an Insectile Aberration. Then it kind of shuts off your Reanimate plan, so might have to get moving a little bit.
It depends if Steven casts the Scalding Tarn, plays the Scalding Tarn. Okay, now by the fact that he played the Scalding Tarn, Owen knows exactly what's in Steven's hand.
He knows the last 2 cards. Good point.
So now Owen can bait the Daze, and he knows the last card's a Stifle, so on his turn he can just go Entomb, Reanimate.
Oh.
And even though he'll take 8, he has a Grizzlebrand to play. Or he could even get an Elishnorn.
Yeah, he can get Elishnorn. He can get any big dummy now. There's the Daze to take care of this.
Yeah.
Turtenwald on the upkeep doesn't want to draw the Polluted Delta, so yep, here's an Entomb.
And that's the reason I don't think Steven could have played the Scalding Tarn, because if Steven didn't play the Scalding Tarn, Owen might put the brakes on this plan just because he doesn't know what that last card is.
Yep.
And there's really no value in playing a Scalding Tarn there.
Yep. Also, given the texture of Owen's hand, he might be a little bit afraid of some sort of counterspell type effect. But now that he's working with perfect information, as you mentioned, he knows the last cards are Daze and Stifle. He can play accordingly, and because his brainstorming and his manipulation in this game was so good, he's got everything that he needs.
Yeah, his hand was just too stacked from that careful study or the brainstorm earlier on. Looks like we're going to see a reanimate of the Sphinx of Steel Wind.
Which we will bring up because that thing has a lot of text on it. You see Turtenwald draws a duress for the turn, but he knows that he can cast Reanimate, take a bunch of damage, and get this thing into play. It's got protection from some pretty important colors here, red and green. It also has Flying, First Strike, Vigilance, and Lifelink. No, again, no big deal. Not the end of the world. As Mann is going to draw a card, he's going to add to a Stifle.
I'd say the protection from red and green is the most important part of the abilities.
Let's see what he finds. He's going to look with Delver. You're a little late, Force of Will.
Late to the party, but...
Yep. You were just a touch late. The card's in Mann's hand right now, of course. Tropical Island that he picked up from Daze and a Stifle. Force of Will staring him back in the face, but he might sacrifice that Scalding Tarn to make sure he doesn't draw Force of Will because it doesn't do anything right now. And he will do that and get a Volcanic Island.
So it's like small things like that you can kind of tell this guy knows what he's doing with Rug Delver.
Yeah.
It's, checking first with Delver. I don't want that card shuffling away. It's like those small little sequences that, might seem obvious, but it's over the course of a long tournament, you can make mistakes and forget to do stuff like that. So it kind of shows you how much of an advantage you have from just really, truly understanding your deck.
Yeah, it's those small advantages that helped him win the Legacy Open when we were in Atlanta. He shuffled away a Force Will, but he drew one. So he's got that Tropical Island, Stifle, and a Force Will. Hey, he's even got a blue card to remove to force. He's in great shape.
So yeah, really, again, just like the first game, it's really difficult for the Rug Delver deck to do anything once one of those giant creatures is in play. Duress is going to get cast now. He could take the Stifle, to be honest. I mean, there's really... Force of Will doesn't really do much.
I think he can flip a coin.
Yeah.
On what card to take right now. He's going to actually take the Stifle. So going to leave Mann with a Force Will and come in here for 6. One of the cards that we don't see all the time is the card that's actually in play, Sphinx of the Steel Wind, from Turtenwald. There's a lot of different threats that people can play in your Animator. You always see 4 Gristlebrand's and an Elish Norn. Sometimes you see Ashen Rider in the main deck, sometimes you don't. I know Drew Levin was a big advocate of Blazing Archon in the main deck going into Washington, D.C., the Grand Prix that, ironically, Turtenwald did win. But now we see Sphinx of the Steel Wind, which is actually a pretty good card in what looks like the particular metagame that we're in.
Yeah, it's definitely good against like a deck like Jund. Definitely good against a deck like Bug.
Yeah, Bug is so big right now, and it doesn't have a great way to actually answer this card. And it also, obviously, gets to play defense, so there's a Wasteland, and that's an extension of the hand. Owen Turtenwald is going to win this match over Stephen Mann, 2-0 Reanimator. Deck a little surprised to see Owen playing, and I know Huey's playing it as well. Does defeat Rug Delver.
Yeah, and this could be one of those brilliant metagame calls, because every once in a while, we'll see a Reanimator deck like this, win an Open, and you think to yourself, wow, how did these decks not win every Open? They just look so good sometimes, particularly when the field just isn't ready for them.
I mean, those 2 games, if those are any indication, things are going to be pretty easy here for Owen. As we're going to move on to a second match here, and strap in, because we're going to have a lot of top activations, my friend. So we're going to see one player who's very comfortable activating a Sensei's Divining Top, who's Joe Lissette.